Okay, everyone, welcome back to another lesson. Hopefully, we're not going to have any issues like we did last time. I'm not seeing any issues on my end. It's not saying that there are any drop frames. Say hi in chat if you're there, um, and let me know if everything is working good. Okay. I mean, I'm not seeing anything from you guys yet, but at least on my end, things seem to be working fine. So I'm going to assume that it is. So today we're going to talk about a few different topics. We're going to see some grammar points. We'll talk about adjectives. We'll talk about verbs just a little bit, kind of in an introductory way. And then we'll look at some things like how do you express dates in Japanese so that you can talk about things that are going to happen in a specific time. Okay? So we'll start with adjectives. And one fundamental thing, which I had mentioned yesterday, is that some words that are verbs in English are adjectives in Japanese. So, for example, suki. Suki is one of the most common adjectives that you're going to learn to start with. And it's confusing because in English, this is a verb. You like something. But in Japanese, suki is an adjective. It is something causes you to like it. So it is a thing that is likable, is suki. And if you really like something a lot, you would say daisuki. This dai, it means big. So you really like it, big suki, like it a lot. Conversely, if you don't like something, you can say kirai. I don't like it is kirai. And if you really hate something, you can say dai kirai. Just like you have daisuki, you have dai kirai. This doesn't mean that you can just attach dai to everything, but it's helpful to know that this means big. So it's just a modifier that's telling you that you really like it or you really don't like it. So here is an example sentence. And I think given the information that you have already, you might be able to figure out what this means. So let's try reading it. It says, Nani iro ga suki desu ka? And the response is, Ao ga daisuki desu. Okay? So go over that in your head, try and recall what we've learned so far, and see if you can understand what this means. Here's what it means. The first person says, Nani iro ga suki desu? Which color do you like? In English, when we translate, we're going to choose to use the most natural sounding English, even if it's not a one-to-one translation of the Japanese. And so rather than force it to be what color is pleasing to you, we're just going to say, what color do you like? And then the response is, I like blue a lot. Not blue is extremely pleasing to me, just I like blue a lot. Sometimes you want to negate an adjective. So we talked about how there are a few different types of adjectives in Japanese. There are different ways to negate the different types of adjectives. So if you have what's a nominal adjective, so this is an adjective that is made from a noun. That is, you would put a na at the end of it. They're called na adjectives in some cases. Then the way that you negate that is adjective janai. Not something is your adjective janai. So we'll see that in practice. If you say, Watashi ga suki desu ka? Do you like me? You can say, Kirai janai desu. I don't dislike you. This is typically what would happen if you asked someone on a date by asking, hey, do you like me? They wouldn't respond with, no, I don't like you. They're more likely to say, well, I don't dislike you. And that's just being polite, but it's their way of saying, they're not agreeing with you. They're not saying, yes, I do like you. So you're being rejected, but they're being nice about it. So when you say watashi ga suki desu ka? Kirai janai desu. Well, I don't hate you. Okay, so this is how it would work. Kirai janai, right? So you had your adjective kirai and then janai. There's another class of adjectives. These are adjectives that end with e, even when you use the kanji. So hoshi ends with an e, and this is when you want something. Again, it's an adjective in Japanese, even though it's a verb in English. So when something makes you want it, that is hoshi. Atarashi is something that's new. And again, notice it ends in e when you write it in kanji. Furui means old. Again, ends in e. And atsui means hot. Ends in e. There's a pattern here. Samui means cold. Now there are two types of samui. There's samui when you're talking about the weather, and there's sumetai, which is when you're talking about things that are cold to the touch, like ice. So samui is like the atmosphere is cold. And tsumetai is when something is cold to touch. Again, though, ending in an e very clearly. And kawaii, which is cute. Kawaii is also an e adjective. Generally, you won't see it written like this with kanji. Most people write it out in hiragana like this. It has two e's, so it's kawaii, not kawaii. And that's going to matter for when we negate these. And when something is scary, it's kowai, not kawaii. This is kowai, right? Just one e, so it's a little shorter. So to negate this kind of adjective, so a true adjective, right? Or, these e adjectives, they end in an e. You remove the e from the end of it, and you add kunai. Okay, so we'll see that in practice. You have samui, which means cold. You remove the e to get samu, and then you add kunai. So samu kunai is not cold. Here's that written out. So this is if you were writing it in hiragana, samui, remove the e and add kunai. If you had it in kanji, you can see how this works. You have the kanji, remove the e and say kunai. So samui would become samukunai, and this means not cold. So let's use hoshi in this example sentence. Inu ga hoshii desu ka? Do you want a dog? Hoshikunai. So you drop one of the e's, right? It's hoshii. So this e goes away. Hoshikunai. Neko ga hoshii desu. I don't want a dog. I would want a cat. All right? So inu ga hoshii desu ka? Hoshikunai. Neko ga hoshii desu. Okay, so assuming that that's clear, how to negate the two main types of adjectives. There is na adjectives would be maru maru janai, right? So suki janai, kirai janai. And if it was an e adjective, a true adjective, then it's going to end in an e. So you know that. So you remove the e and you say kunai instead. Hoshikunai, atsukunai, samukunai. And if it's something like kawaii, where there are two e's, you're just removing the last one. So it becomes kawaii kunai, which is why the two e's there are important. So with that, we can continue looking at another koso ado pattern. So if you'll remember, we talked about the kore, sore, are, dore, and the different spheres of influence. Kore for the speaker, sore for the listener, are for outside of both, and dore for being just a general question. So we have the same spheres of influence, but now we're going to talk about places. So it's the same pattern, ko, so, a, do. So you have koko is here, soko is there, asoko, not ako, but asoko, which is over there, and doko, which is where. Okay, so again, it's the same ko, so, a, do pattern, and it's the same spheres of listening, same spheres of influence. We can learn a few more words before we start to use example sentences here. So naka means inside, and soto means outside. So neko wa doko desu ka? Talking about the cat. Doko desu ka? Where is it? Soko desu. It's over there. There being the listener's sphere of influence. So when A asks, where is the cat? And B says, it's over there, it means it's near A. Here's a way that you can ask about restaurants and where you might want to go. Doko ga oishii desu ka? So oishii, this is an E adjective that means tasty or delicious. So doko ga oishii is where is tasty desu ka? Asking your question. And the response, this is in katakana, so don't worry if you can't read it. Makudonaruto ga oishii desu. So makudonaruto is McDonald's in katakana. Since a foreign word borrowed into Japanese, write it using katakana, which we will learn soon. So makudonaruto ga oishii is saying that McDonald's is tasty. So while this is literally saying where is tasty, McDonald's is tasty, this is how I would translate it, which is, what's a good place to eat? And the response is, well, McDonald's is good. Even though the direct translation is, where is tasty? In English, that's not how you would say it. So instead we go with this. Okay. So if that's clear as well, we can move to the next concept, which is a conjunction, but as we're used to in English, is demo. So if you have two sentences, and sentence 2 is contrasting with sentence 1. So you'd say, I like this, but I don't like that. That concept, that conjunction, is demo in Japanese. So you have one sentence that can stand on its own. You have a second sentence that could stand on its own. And you want to highlight a contrast between them. You can do that with demo and attach the two together. So, inu ga suki desu. I like dogs. Demo, neko wa kirai desu. But cats, I don't like. Right? So you can see, if we didn't have this demo and we just had two sentences, it is inu ga suki desu, neko wa kirai desu. I like dogs, I don't like cats. And this demo is highlighting the contrast between the first sentence and the second sentence. And so, I like dogs, but I don't like cats. You can also have wa to establish a change of topic with demo. So, watashi wa 15 sai desu. I am 15 years old. Demo, oni-san wa, but my older brother, 16 sai desu. He is 16 years old. Okay? So you're using here, you can use ga or wa on your first sentence because it's the first sentence. You can either establish watashi as the topic of the first sentence, or it can just be the subject of the sentence. And either way, what you're saying is that I am 15. Whether you want to say I'm 15 and explicitly state the subject, or just say, speaking of me, 15. But from the second sentence, you're going to contrast the first one. It will be wa. So you change the topic. It's like, yeah, I'm 15, but as for my older brother, which is why it's wa, he's 16. Okay? And here's another case where you can have wa and ga in the same sentence. There's no demo here. So, 私の友達はポケモンが好きです. So we talked about this yesterday. We'll go over it again. Wa is the topic of your sentence. 私の友達は my friend. So talking about my friend, and then you can kind of put this in a box, and if you scratched it out, the rest of the sentence should still make grammatical sense. Here we have ポケモンが好きです. Likes Pokemon. Okay, someone likes Pokemon. It doesn't matter who likes Pokemon, because like is a verb in English. That sounds weird. But in Japanese, like is an adjective. So, ポケモンが好きです just means Pokemon is pleasant. And to whom it is pleasant, that comes from 私の友達はポケモンが好きです. My friend likes Pokemon. And again, Pokemon is written in katekana because it is short for pocket monsters, which is English words. So pocket monster got shortened to Pokemon, and so Pokemon. Okay. Moving on then, we can talk about dates. So here's some vocabulary to start with. We'll start with itsu, which means when. Nangatsu is specifically what month. So nani plus gatsu, which is month. So nangatsu. Nan nichi. Nichi is day. So what day? Nan nichi. This is specifically then what day of the month. Kyo is today. This kanji means now, and this one means day. So kyo is today. Ashita is tomorrow. So this kanji is kind of like the sun rising and moving to the next one. And then this is day. So ashita is the next day. And kino. So this one means previous, and this one means day. And together, kino means yesterday. Now you're noticing in these first ones you have nangatsu, nannichi, and these kind of make sense when you see this is nani and this is gatsu. But when it comes here, kyo, ashita, kino, there's no pattern. We'll talk about why that is and isn't when we start talking about kanji. So the dates of the month. There's a little bit of a pattern here, but it's not a consistent pattern. Just bear with me, and then later on when we learn counter words, maybe this will make more sense to you. So, the days of the month. Tsuitachi is the first. Futsuka is the second. Mikka is the third. Yokka, the fourth. Itsuka, the fifth. Muika, the sixth. Nanoka, the seventh. Yoka, the eighth. Kokonoka, the ninth. Toka, the 10th. So later when we learn counter words, this futsu, mi, itsu, mu, nano, kokono, these will make more sense where they come from. But for now, even though they don't really line up with the numbers that you've learned so far, some of them do. Yokka kind of makes a little sense because it's yon, right? Nanoka kind of makes sense because it's nana. Yoka, and then toka, all right? But then going forward from 11 to 20, it's a little easier. So it's ju-ichi nichi. Nichi means day. So now it becomes 10 plus 1 day. So the 11th day. Ju-ni nichi. Ju-san nichi. This one should be easier for you. Ju-yokka, not Ju-yon nichi. It's Ju-yokka. Ju-go nichi. Ju-roku nichi. Ju-shichi nichi, not Nana nichi, but Shichi nichi. Ju-hachi nichi. Ju-ku nichi, not Kyu nichi. And Hatsuka. So most of these are still following a pattern. It's the number plus nichi, which is day. although you still have ju yokka, which breaks the pattern a little bit. And you do have to be mindful of shichinichi and kunichi rather than nana and kyu. Again, specific readings of these numbers will come up where it is only one and not the other, and you just have to remember them. And then from 21 to 31, it's the same pattern. Niju ichi nichi. So 2 times 10 plus 1, 21. Right? Niju ni nichi, niju san nichi, niju yokka, niju go nichi, niju roku nichi, niju shichi nichi, niju hachi nichi, niju ku nichi, sanju nichi, and then the 31st continues the pattern, sanju ichi nichi. So the first 10 days of the month have a weird pattern, but then from there, every date that is ending with a particular digit ends the same way. It is ichinichi, ninichi, sannichi, yokka, konichi, rokunichi, shichinichi, hachinichi, kunichi. So hopefully that's not too hard. Why isn't ashta pronounced ashta instead of ashita? Why isn't it pronounced ashita instead of ashta? It is ashita, right? Technically speaking, it is ashita. What happens is devoicing. It's the same phenomenon that causes desu to become des. So in the same way, the vowel sound ashita, the e kind of disappears as you're speaking quickly, and it just becomes ashta. So I'm trying to mimic as close to a native pronunciation as I can with my Japanese, just so that I'm not teaching you Japanese with an accent, even though I do have an accent that is not a native Japanese accent. So ashita is not wrong, that's correct. And then you will often hear in songs the E could even be elongated based on the melody of the song. So there is a song called Hakujitsu in which ashita is said. And that's weird when you think about it. No one who actually says the word ashta is going to say ashita. But in the song, it fits the melody, and so it's okay. All right. So devoicing, there are rules for devoicing. Dogen is a YouTube channel. He talks about the principles behind devoicing and how they work, but I would not worry about learning devoicing yet. I think it's a topic you can handle much later when your focus is how can I sound closer to native, or how can I listen to native material and recognize some patterns that they are using to sound different from what I expect. I have a theoretical knowledge of what they should be saying here, and it doesn't line up 100%. Then that's when you can look at these kinds of principles. Okay, so let's use what we've learned about the days of the month in sentences. Kyou wa nannichi desu ka? Kyou, today. Wa, speaking of today. Nannichi desu ka? What day is it? Of the month, specifically. When you're saying nannichi, it is what day of the month. And it's nichi. This matches these nichi, right? So it's understood when you say kyou wa nannichi, you're asking what day of the month. Not what day of the week. That's a different one, which we will learn later. And again, it's marked with wa. So in theory, even if this was gone, nannichi desu ka? What day of the month is it? Makes sense. And it would be assumed you're talking about today, and if you weren't talking about today, then you would need to specifically say something. So, here's an example sentence. Party wa, this is katakana again, so I don't expect you to be able to read it. Party wa itsu desu ka? When is the party? Right? This is just the English word party. 21日です. It's on the 21st. パーティーはいつですか? 21日です. Now we can talk about the months. The months are much simpler than the dates because it's just number plus gatsu. Okay? 1月、2月、3月、4月、5月、6月、7月、8月、9月、10月、11月、12月. Right? Just number plus gatsu. There is an anime called March Comes In Like a Lion. The Japanese name is Sangatsu no Rayon. Right? Sangatsu, March, no Rayon, the lion of March. March comes in like a lion, then just happens to be an adaptation of the name because they didn't want you to think that it is a marching lion, so they changed it around a bit. So here's another word. This is Christmas in katakana. So, Christmas wa itsu desu ka? When is Christmas? 12月です. It's in December. 12月, the 12th month. Okay? So, Japanese person isn't going to have specific names for the months. They're just going to know it in terms of the date. It is the 12th month, and that's how they think of dates. But they have specific names for the days of the month, unlike we do. They're counted days, so really it's still coming from the number, but when we talk about counter words, then that pattern will make more sense. But they have, you can think of special names for the days, where we have special names for the months. Okay, let's try another one. 子供の日は itsu desu ka? So 子供 means kids, and 日 is another word for nichi. It means day. So 子供の日 is Children's Day. 子供の日は itsu desu ka? When is Children's Day? 5月5日です. 5月 May 5日 the 5th です. So Children's Day in Japan is on May 5th. So 子供の日は5月5日です. Okay. And I think Children's Day is different depending on the country. As far as I know, the United States does not have a dedicated Children's Day. In India, where I grew up, it was November 14th. Okay. Let's talk about verbs and using the past tense. Well, first we'll talk without verbs, and then this concept will extend to verbs, and that'll make our life easy. So if something is in the present tense, your sentence des, then to convert it to past tense, it becomes deshita. Okay? So des becomes deshita in the past tense. And this is again like ashita, where it's devoicing. So it's deshita. Okay? Deshita. But the E gets dropped when you're speaking, kind of, so it's deshita. Alright? So, 車は何色でしたか? What color was the car this time? 赤いと青いでした. It was red and blue. So, deshita, past tense, no longer talking about the present. So you can imagine this is a conversation between two people. They're trying to remember a car that they saw before. And so, 車は何色でしたか? And 青いと赤でした. Or 赤いと青いでした. It was red and blue. So, you could have a situation like this. パーティーはいつですか? When is the party? A asks, expecting it to be in the future. But B responds, 20日でした. It was on the 20th. Right? So when is the party? ですか? It was でした 20日. Alright? Which is a little sad that A missed the party, but it happens. It's an example sentence to demonstrate that. So you could ask a question with the present tense because you're expecting something to happen now or in the future. But the response can be still in the past tense, like it is here, because whatever actually happened was in the past. Okay, let's talk about the days of the week. So the days of the week, these, similar to other languages, come from the names of the planets, and I'll explain that in a second. We have a question in chat. So past tense questions end with deshitaka. Yes, here we have that example. Kuruma wa nani iro deshitaka? So what color was the car? So when you're explicitly stating something as being in the past tense, then you can use deshita. And when tense is not coming into it, or if you're expecting it to be in the present or future, then it would be des. So briefly, I'll explain that in Japanese, there are only two tenses, not three like in English, where you have past, present, and future. In Japanese, it's just past and non-past. So both present and future tense are one concept because it is either has already happened or has not already happened. So if it's in the present or future, it's the same tense. So that's convenient. You don't have to learn special rules for a future. It's just des or deshita. Is or was. And is includes the future. So when is the party, as it is in English? It could be now, it could be in the future. It's generally asking when is it, but it's assumed that the party didn't already happen. If the party had already happened, it would be deshita, right? And in English, it would be was. Same thing. That stays consistent. So that's good. That's easy for us to remember. Okay, so the days of the week. All days of the week are going to have yobi at the end, which in kanji is this combination. Yobi, which is weekday, basically. And then the days are getsuyobi, kayobi, suiyobi, mokuyobi, kinyobi. This is, I've typoed this, it's kin and then yobi. All right, not kinyobi like this, but kinyobi, doyobi, and nichiyobi. And if you wanted to ask what day, nan yobi. So yobi is day of the week because it is week plus day, right? Week, day. And you have what nan or nani is your question word, what. So here are the origins of the days of the week, right? So you have getsu, which is the moon, ka is fire, sui is water, moku is wood, kin is metal or gold, and do is, this is, which one was do? Yeah. Doyobi is Saturday, is the earth, and then Nichi is the sun. Okay, you have a question from last lesson. Since you said anata is perceived as rude, do people use third person when speaking to each other? Like if I had to ask what color is your car, would I say what color is Derek's car? Yes, that is pretty correct. That's an astute observation, and that is generally how you would ask it. So it would be Deruk-san no kuruma wa naniro desu ka? Is how you would say it. I do want to make it clear, anata is not automatically rude. Okay? So you can ask anata no kuruma if you wanted to. But it would need to be in the right contexts. It's generally less that you can't say anata in terms of asking your, you can say anata no. Or if you wanted to contrast something to yourself, you could say anata wa. But at the same time, it is both grammatically correct and generally preferred among strangers to use their name directly when asking a question like this. So While in English, you can just use the pronoun you, straightforward. In any context, in Japanese, you might want to say deruku-san no kuruma wa, even if I'm right there. If you did not know my name and there was a third person general thing. Yeah, we can talk about that when we talk about family members because it will come up then. But there are ways to refer to strangers without knowing their names. And they generally are uncle and auntie or brother and sister without it being obvious that it is a brother or sister. All right, so getting back to the days of the week, right? The etymology behind them. So the moon this is the kanji for the moon. Okay, it's tsuki or getsu. This also you'll notice is month. When we talked about which month, it was the same kanji. That's because a month is roughly one moon phase from new to full back to new, right? That's 28 days was roughly a month before we standardized it to our weird Julian calendar that we have now. And then the Julian calendar was adjusted further. So the Gregorian calendar now uses a weird mix of days, but it was based on 28, right? Based on the phases of the moon. So this is the kanji for moon, okay? And so the first day, moon day, Monday, okay? Getsuyobi. Next you have this. So this is Mars. Mars is the fire planet. So Kayobi is coming from Mars. And so Tuesday is Mars, which, if you think about the English names for the planets, do I have a slide about the English planets? I don't. Okay. The English names of the planets come from Norse mythology. So Monday is still Moon Day. Tuesday comes from Tyr's Day. Tyr is the god of war in Norse mythology. And so it's still Mars. It's the same planet. Next is Mercury, which they have Suiyobi. So Mercury for them is this. And this is in English, this is Wednesday. Wednesday is Odin's day, so it comes after Jupiter. No, hold on. This is Venus, right? No, I'm mixed up. Mercury in Norse mythology, I don't think I remember. But this is Wednesday, which is Odin's day in Norse mythology, and Odin is generally Jupiter. But anyway, you get Mokuyobi next for Jupiter, which is wood, which I had mentioned is Odin's day. In English, this is Thursday, which is Thor's day. So Thor became Thursday. Friday comes from Frida or Freya. So she was the goddess of beauty, which is Venus. And you get Kin Yobi. Kin is metal. Well, it's gold. And then just all metals are some special kind of gold. Then you have Toyobi. So this is the Earth. But it's Saturn in our... in English names, it's Saturn. So Saturn day becomes Saturday. And then Sunday is Nichiyobi, which is the sun. Okay. So it does correspond to a planet. Each of these do correspond to a planet. So there's the moon, there's the sun. They're not really planets, but they're major objects in the sky. And then you have Mars, Mercury, Jupiter, Venus, and Saturn, which are the planets that are visible with the naked eye. And you have days of the week named after them. This is a pattern that exists not just in Japanese, it exists in English as well, and, you know, in general, the European sphere, where most, I think, languages name days after planets. This also exists in Indian languages, where, again, days are named after the different planets, and again, the moon and the sun were considered planets in this way, even though they're not. So, using those names, Kyou wa nanyobi desu ka? Speaking of today, what day of the week is it? And The response is 火曜日です. It's Tuesday. Okay? Going back to this, if you wanted to see it. In hiragana, Monday, 月曜日, Tuesday, 火曜日, Wednesday, 水曜日, Thursday, 木曜日, Friday, 金曜日, Saturday, 土曜日, and Sunday, 日曜日. So I think you'll find 月曜日 and 日曜日 will probably be easier to remember because they're the same, Monday and Sunday, moon and sun. And then you just have to remember these elements, right? The fire, water, wood, metal, earth elements and the order in which they come. But that's fine. In the same way that you as a child learned the order in which these days exist, even though there's no real pattern to them, I think you'll be able to figure it out. So, 今日は何曜日ですか? 火曜日です. What day of the week is it? It is Tuesday. And here you can see in kanji, this day, what weekday is it? Fire week day, right? So the name is kayobi. It is the day of the week for fire. And so Tuesday is kayobi. So when you've learned some kanji, these sentences start to make a lot more sense to you. Because there's a lot of information packed into these logographic symbols. And the difficulty is just knowing how to read them as words that you say out loud. But you might get to a point, if you learn kanji, where you don't know how to say the word, but you know what it means. Because you can see the picture and it makes sense to you. And this is generally why kanji remains in use, even if it has difficulties with learning it. So there's a pro for kanji and why you should look forward to the day that we start learning it. Okay, so we talked about days of the month, we talked about days of the week, we talked about the months themselves. So now let's talk about years. So toshi means year. Okay, this is the kanji for year, and it's read as toshi. It's also read as nen, and kanji are weird like that. They're read in a couple of different ways. So when you use year in a word, like when you combine it with other kanji, it becomes nen. So nannen, how many years? Kotoshi, this year. So it's toshi in this case because kotoshi was already a word in Japanese. So this year specifically is called kotoshi. But then you have kyonen, which is last year, and rainen, which is next year. Okay, so again, you're going to see this nen in all of them. Even though it's kotoshi, it's toshi, so that makes sense. And it's just nannen, kotoshi is this year, kyonen is last year, and rainen is next year. If you wanted to express a date using a year, it's just number plus nen. The same way that it was number plus gatsu for month, a year is number plus nen. So, 今年は何年ですか? This year, what year is it? 2021年です. Right? 2000, 2000, 20, 20, 1, 1. 2021年です. Now it is 2022. Last year it was 2021. Okay, so what year is this year? It's 2021. If we updated the slide, it should be 2022. But, you know, it's the same idea. So here's the date format in Japanese. Now that you have all of these elements to put together, this is how you would write out a date, right? So the year comes first, then the month, then the day. Okay, so let's take the football player Derrick Henry's birthday. It is January 4th, 1994. So you'd put the year first, 1994, then you put the month, which is January, and then you put the day, which is the 4th. And if you were to read that, and this is how you would write it normally in kanji, so it's easy. You can just look at that. It's like, okay, 1994 is the year, and then the first month and the fourth day. But if you had to say that out loud, here's how it would work. Sen, 1000. 900, 900. 90, 90. 4, 4 nen, right? So 1994 nen is 1994. 1月, first month. 4日, fourth day. Okay. So Derek Henry, the football player, was born on 1994年1月4日. And this is the date format in Japanese. So it is convenient that it is year, month, day, right? So big to small, which is very nice. And if you can remember these kanji, then you can just type it as number plus this. So this one is nen, getsu, and hi or nichi if you're typing in your thing. Okay? Or toshi or nen, getsu, nichi. Okay. Let's learn a couple of relative time expressions to express dates, right? So you might not always want to use an absolute date. You may want a relative date. So a week is shu. So this week, konshu. Last week, senshu. And next week, raishu. Okay? Similar pattern for month. Month is getsu. So current is kongetsu. Last is sengetsu. And the next is raigetsu. And you can see from the kanji, this is now, last, next. Now, last, next. Okay? And then they're read the same way. So it's shu is week, konshu, senshu, raishu. And if it was month, getsu, kongetsu, sengetsu, raigatsu. And then a special word, birthday, is tanjobi. Okay, tanjobi. So this is hi, which becomes bi, tanjobi. This is a character which means life. So birthday, right? Birthday. So here are 4 people talking about the same thing. A asks a question, and then B, C, and D all respond to A. So A asks, Tanjobi wa itsu desu ka? When is your birthday? B says, Raishu no kinyobi desu. Next week on Friday. C says, Konshu no mokuyobi desu. This week on Thursday. And D says, Senshu no suiyobi deshita. Last week on Wednesday. It was last week on Wednesday. There you go. Okay. And I know that we can't really read kanji yet, but tanjobi wa itsu desu ka? And you have raishu, konshu, senshu no kinyobi, mokuyobi, suiyobi. Right? So kanji makes sense, at least in times like this. It definitely has a use. It compresses all of this writing into something simpler in terms of the space. And it does mean that the grammatical elements, like no, which is your possessive marker, and deshita, which is telling you it was in the past, they stand out compared to the content of the sentence, which is in kanji. Again, we'll talk about kanji later, and I'll expose the merits of it when we get there. Okay. So any questions on this stuff? We still have some time, so I might go into another lesson right after this. But quickly, any questions about this? All right. while you guys prepare some questions, if you have any, I will quickly change my slides. Yes, so janai goes right after the adjective, assuming that it is a na adjective or a nominal adjective. If it was an e adjective, it would go kunai, right? You drop the e and say kunai. So suki janai desu is correct, and it would mean that I don't like you or I don't like it. It would depend on what you were talking about, depending on whatever it is you were talking about. Suki janai desu is that it's just don't like, and then whatever it is you were talking about. If you are specifying what it is that you don't like, that would be the subject of your sentence. So, maru maru ga suki janai. Correct. Suki janai deshita then would be I did not like in the past tense. That's good. So you did manage to figure that out, which is good. So yeah, if you combine these concepts that you know, it's very modular. Japanese is a language that makes sense grammatically. It just isn't something that makes sense from a vocabulary standpoint. When I start introducing the verbs and the different forms in which you would conjugate verbs and so on, I'm going to use a very kind of modular model to explain it. So it's going to look like Lego blocks that you just kind of chain together. And this works even for adjectives and so on. So it is a logical sentence, a logical language structurally. It's just that it has its quirks that are very hard for people coming from a non-Asian language, I would say, to get used to, because a more Western language doesn't tend to use the same strategies. And so when Japanese is taught from a Western perspective with Western grammar ideals, things fall apart. All right. So I do have my slides ready for the next one. So here we go. I'll go ahead and give you a second to type your complex sentence, and then I'll start talking about this. And so remember, we had demo as well to talk about things that you contrast two sentences. Okay, so there is your sentence. It says, 俺は赤いが好きじゃないでした。でも赤いが好きです. Okay, so you're saying, I did not used to like red, but now I like red. Is that correct? Is that what you were trying to go for? I'm going to assume it was. So yeah, I think it's a good sentence overall, constructed well, mostly correct. The only thing I would add, it does work. Grammatically, it does work. The only thing I would say is, in English, if I was to literally translate this, it would say, I did not like red, but I like red. And so you just want to add that little, but now I like red. And so you would say, でも今は赤いが好きです. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. I think in this lesson we talk about relative time. So we might talk about ima, which is now. But even if we don't, that's the only change I would make. And it's, not fair to you to expect you to have known that, not having seen that word before. But I think you understand what I mean. So otherwise, apart from that, well done. Good job. Okay. So let's go on to our next topic. And as you have questions, you can ask them in chat. So you might have noticed from listening to people using Japanese, a lot of sentences end with this ne. Ne is an ending particle. It doesn't mean anything on its own. It's not a word. What it is kind of like seeking confirmation from the other person that is listening to you. And so Japanese as a language is very societally driven. And one of the concepts in Japanese society is harmony. So when you ask ne at the end of your sentence, it's just, don't you agree? So this is kind of similar to in English when you say so-and-so, right? Or you agree, don't you? Kind of a thing, where you're seeking confirmation from the other person. And very frequently, a Japanese person who's listening is going to give a verbal cue to indicate that they agree or they're listening, which generally would be although it can be hai or so or something like that. Generally a positive word that means yes. So let's see ne in action. 今日は1日ですね. This is not a question, although it sounds like a question. And it's saying, today is the first, isn't it? And the response then is, はい、そうです. はい means yes. そうです means it is that way. Right? So comes from a kosoado pattern, which we might talk about in the future. So yes, that's what it is. So today is the first, isn't it? It becomes a question, but it's not really a question. It's just like, today is the first, isn't it? The isn't it is just getting confirmation. But really you're just saying, yeah, today is the first. And then you're just making sure with this, isn't it? That's what ne is doing at the end. Okay? So if you see ne in a sentence and it comes at the end, that's all it's doing. It's kind of softening the statement, making it seeking agreement from the other person. And you don't always have to respond to something when someone says ne with like a full sentence. You can just go hai or so or even, depending on what it is they said. Sometimes they might ask you a question with ne, but we'll talk about that in the future. Okay, so you know a little Japanese. Let's start talking about how you would order something if you went to Japan. Ikura is a word, and it means how much. Specifically, when you're asking about like how much does something cost, it's ikura. Mizu is water. Enpitsu is pencil. This kanji is complicated, so don't try to learn it at all right now. Just know the word. Enpitsu is pencil. Otsukari. Otsukari is the change or the money. This is not a literal translation. Really, it's just like, it's a little different. But don't worry about that. For now, otsukari means change. And then at a later date, we'll actually talk about what it means. So the way that you add OBS... All right, I should be back. I think OBS disconnected there for a second. So yeah, that's on my internet, but it seems to be working good now. Okay, so I'll go over this sentence one more time because you probably missed it. Yeah, otsukari would be that. I made a mistake, don't worry. It's otsukairi anyway. So, mizu o kudasai is please give me some water. So, kudasai is a polite way of saying please give me. O is the object. So if give is the verb ultimately in please give me, o is what are you giving? Mizu, water. So please give me water. Give me some water, please. Enpitsu o onegai shimasu. Okay, so here negau is a verb which means to request. Negai shimasu is making it polite. And then the o is making it really polite. So onegai shimasu is I request of you a pencil. Enpitsu o onegai shimasu. I request of you a pencil, which is could I please have a pencil? So you could either say, you know, enpitsu o kudasai, which is please give me a pencil, or enpitsu o onegai shimasu, which is I'm asking you for a pencil. Either one work. They mean the same thing roughly, which is I want a pencil, and you're asking them politely if you can get one from them. Yeah, so onegai is more polite than just negai. And we'll talk about why you basically always have to say onegai when you're asking for something. And I'll talk about that much later when we talk about keigo, which is polite language. By default, for now, just learn it as onegai shimasu. And then later, we'll talk about why it should be onegai shimasu and not just impitsu onegau, which would be the plainest form to say it. And that's like, hey, give me a pencil. Okay. So we can talk about the inclusion marker now, which is mo. Mo is a non-logical particle like wa. Okay. It's going to replace wa or ga in your sentence, depending on, if your subject was the topic or not. Either way, it's going to replace wa or ga. And it just means this also. Okay. So if you had a sentence like impitsu o kudasai, right? So boku wa imputsu o kudasai is to me, could you please give me a pencil? Then you would replace the wa with mo to say boku mo impitsu kudasai, right? Give me also a pencil. Here's an example. Nani ga suki desu ka? What do you like? Banana ga suki desu. This is katakana, so don't worry about it now. Banana ga suki desu. I like bananas. Ringo mo suki desu. I also like apples. So it's replacing ga here, right? By default, the sentence is Ringo ga suki desu, but you replace ga with mo to make it an inclusivity marker and say, I also like this. Okay? So it's kind of like saying two in English. I like bananas. I like apples too. Ringo mo suki desu. Here, I have a sample conversation. You could imagine this happening in a restaurant. So the waiter comes up and says, Nani ga ii desu ka? Which is, what is good? If you were to take it literally, ii means good. So nani ga ii desu ka is what is good. But really, it's asking, what will you have? It's asking what looks good to you. So person B says, lobster to biru o kudasai. Lobster and beer for me. So please give me lobster and a beer. And then C says, boku mo biru kudasai. Right? And he drops the O. It's okay in some cases to do that. So he says, boku mo biru kudasai. So I will also have a beer. B then asks, ikura desu ka? How much is that? A says, 1600 yen desu. Right? So A is the waiter and says, that'll be 1,600 yen. C asks then, because C wasn't paying attention, C asks of B, ikura deshita? How much was it? And B tells them, 1600 yen deshita. It was 1,600 yen. And then, boku mo pizza ga hoshii desu. And then it's like, oh, I also want a pizza. Okay? Here is the full in English. So, nani ga ii desu ka? What would you like? Lobster to biru kudasai. Please give me lobster and a beer. Boku mo biru kudasai. Please give me a beer too. Ikura desu ka? How much is that? 1600 yen desu. It'll be 1,600 yen. C then, who wasn't paying attention, ikura deshita? How much was it? B says, 1600 yen deshita. It was 1,600 yen. C realizes, oh, we can still spend a little money then. It's not too expensive. And then says, boku mo pizza ga hoshii desu. And then I would also like a pizza. Okay? And this is the same conversation with kanji. Lobster and beer, these are words coming from English, lobster and beer. So they're written in katakana. And same thing here with pizza, which is pizza. Okay. So let's talk about counterwords. I briefly mentioned them. Um, so the way that Japanese works when you count things is you're not going to count just as the numbers 1, 2, 3. They have words for counting things. Depending on what thing you're counting, you count using these words. So we'll start with the generic counter. This is the counter for things in general. And so if you were counting a thing and you don't know anything about it, it's an abstract concept, like say you had an idea or a question. Those are not physical things. They don't have a form. You'd use this thing. Alternatively, if you don't know the counter word for something, use this. Okay? Most items can be counted with the generic counter and you'll be okay. And if you only needed the specific counters for people and animals, and most of the times you can get away with this apart from that. So the way that this works, the generic counter is hitotsu for 1, futatsu for 2, mitsu, yotsu, itsutsu, mutsu, nanatsu, yatsu, kokonotsu, to. And then going further, it's 11ko, 12ko, and then the pattern continues 13ko, 14ko, and so on. So from there, it's just numbers. And to ask how many, ikutsu. Okay? So this, hito, futa, mi, yo, itsu, mu, nana, ya, kokono. This is the same, if you'll remember, roughly, as our days of the month, right? I know hito wasn't there. That was tsuitachi. But then it was mikka, yokka. So the day counter wasn't tsu, it was ka. And it was mikka, yokka, itsuka, muika, nanoka, right? And so on. So the counter words, that's kind of how they work. Here's the pattern for small, round things, right? So this would be if you're counting like a ball. So then it's ko. Nanko, how many? Ikko, niko, sanko, yonko, koko, rokko, nanako, hakko or hachiko, either one. Kyuko, juko, juikko, juniko, and just numbers from there. Okay, so this one's a little easier. This is for small things or round things, inanimate objects. Okay. Long cylindrical things are considered hon. Hon means book. Books are not long and cylindrical, but you can think of like scrolls, right? Wall scrolls. So nanbon, because it's hon, but it gets dakten when words get smashed together. Nanbon, ippon, nihon, sambon, yonhon, gohon, roppon, nanahon, happon or hachihon, kyuhon, jupon, and then juippon, junihon. These patterns continue, so on. So this is for long cylindrical things. So if you're talking about a pen, for example, right? Pen wa ippon o kudasai. Please give me 1 pen. If you wanted 4, right? Pen wa 4 hon kudasai, which is please give me 4 pens. Thin flat things are counted with the mai counter. Again, we don't have to spend too long on learning these counter words, but you know, ichimai, nimai, sammai, yommai, gomai, rokumai, nanamai, hachimai, kyumai, jumai. This one is simple. Okay, it's just number plus. So, pen wa 5 hon desu, right? You're using the correct counter word for pens. This is for the long cylindrical object counter. So, pen wa 5 hon desu. You could also use the generic counter, pen wa itsutsu desu, if you didn't remember this one. Kami o 1 mai kudasai. Kami, in this case, we're using paper. So please give me 1 sheet of paper. So you see sheet of paper. This is basically a counter word, right? It's English. You're not saying give me 1 paper. I know in some places you get away with saying, give me one paper. But if you were speaking proper English in a natively English-speaking country, give me one sheet of paper. How are you supposed to know that paper are counted as sheets? You just do, right? As you learn English, you memorize these things, you hear people say them, and you add that to your vocabulary bank. It would be the same thing with these counterwords. All right. So now let's finally talk about verbs. Oh, we have a question in chat before that. Do parts like ore wa also work as oneself? Like if I want to say ore ga suki desu ka, is that enough, right? So in this case, you're asking if someone likes you, right? Ore ga suki desu ka is completely fine on its own if you're asking them, do you like me, right? If it was obvious from the conversation up till now, you could even just say suki desu ka, and that's, do you like me? Or like, let's say you gave someone ore suki desu ka. Oh, you didn't mean to type ka. Oh, so you just want to say you like yourself. If you say ore ga suki desu, it generally means I like. So I think you would need to change. You might need to say ore ni wa ore ga suki desu, which is then you say, from me. If you were to stand where I'm standing, I like myself. So again, it gets a little more complicated when you're trying to express that kind of a concept, but it's a good question, right? So in that case, ore wa ore ga suki desu would be a way to say it. Yeah, not too far. You can say ore wa, speaking about me, ore ga suki desu. I like myself. Okay. Alternatively, you could use the word that is specifically means myself, which is jibun, and then you could say jibun ga suki desu, which is I like myself. So there is that option. But we'll worry about that when we... It's a good question, though. I like the way you're thinking. And I do think that trying to use words and form sentences is good. So I want to encourage that. And again, I think you can say ore wa ore ga suki desu, which you do know. Okay, I think I'm back. Let me know. Let me know if I'm back. Hopefully I am. I switched my internet connection. So I have two Wi-Fis. One is supposed to be faster than the other. I switched to the faster one. So let's see. Okay, so let's talk about verbs. So here's a couple of verbs. Iku is to go. Kuru is the opposite of going somewhere. It's to come. Kaeru is to return. In this case, we're going to say kaeru is to return home. So it's to go back home. And wakaru is to understand. Okay? So iku, kuru, kaeru, wakaru. These are the four verbs we're going to work with for now. So I talked about different verb types. I'm going to use the terminology that a person on the internet called George Trombley, he runs a YouTube channel called Japanese from Zero. He uses this terminology, and I think it's much more helpful than the actual terminology used in Japanese classes most of the time, even if there is a logical reason for why they're called what they're called. That requires you to understand how verbs work as a whole. This requires you to look at a verb, and then you can figure out which kind it is. Okay? So George Trombley calls verbs as either regular, iru-eru, or irregular verbs. Okay? So the way that you identify if a verb is regular is that it ends with an u sound. Either, some sound that rhymes with u, which can be ru. It could end with ru, or it could end with a sound like iku or kau or something like that. So iku is a regular verb. Kaeru is a regular verb. Okay? Irueru is the second class of verbs. Irueru verbs end in a sound like iru or eru. So, taberu, there's eru at the end. Kaeru, this is a different kaeru. So, this kaeru is to go back home. This kaeru is to change. So, the second kaeru is an irueru verb. And then finally, he calls irregular verbs. There are only two irregular verbs. These are verbs that don't follow the same patterns that the other two do. And they are kuru and suru. And they have special conjugations. Okay? Alternatively, Taekim, who is one of the foremost authorities on Japanese grammar for English learners, he has a PDF on the internet, a blog that you can read, Taekim's Grammar Guide, which is one of the most recommended resources for people learning Japanese. He uses the names that Japanese classes use. So he has u verbs or godan verbs, and he has ru verbs, which are ichidan verbs, and then the exceptions, which are kuru and suru. So those are the same. So saying u verbs when they can end in ru, and then saying ru verbs when you have kaeru ends in ru, but it's not a ru verb, it's an u verb, that can get a little confusing. And knowing what ichidan and godan mean, and knowing that a verb is ichidan or godan, that's hard to know. So this terminology of u verb and ru verb or ichidan and godan, it's difficult, especially at the beginning. So let's not use it. We're going to use the George Trombley regular and irueru verb to start. Okay? So the way that verbs work is that you need verb endings. And the verb endings convey the tense of the verb. Or they can also convey like a positivity or negativity about the verb. So in polite Japanese, which is currently what we're learning, and later I'll teach you casual Japanese, the verb endings are mas, which is present or future, right? Non-past, positive ending. Masen is the present or future negative, as in do not or will not. Mashita, this is like deshita, how deshita, desu becomes deshita, mas becomes mashita. And this is the past positive. And the past negative is masen deshita, right? So it's just masen plus deshita. Okay. So these are the 4 tenses that we're going to learn for verbs right now. In polite form. In casual form, they look a little different. This is polite. So the way that you would conjugate a regular verb, right? So this is a verb that's going to end in a u sound. You change that u sound to its corresponding e sound in the kana chart that I showed you yesterday. And then you add the verb ending that you're trying to form. So you have the verb stem, right? So if the verb is kaeru, you change the ru to ri and becomes kaeri. And then the verb ending, kaerimasu. Okay? You're asking about sumimasen. Sumimasen, again, like, it gets weird when talking about set expressions because an actual translation of them generally comes from polite Japanese, and polite Japanese is a little complicated with how things work. But yeah, you can worry about that in the future. But yeah, masen on its own does mean not. Okay. So let's take a regular verb. Let's take wakaru, which means to understand. And let's change it to past tense to mean I understood. Right? So first, you change the ru, u sound, to its corresponding e sound. So ru becomes ri. So you form this verb stem, wakari, and then you add your verb ending. This time we're adding the past tense. So it's mashita. So wakarimashita. Right? I understood. Wakarimashita. All right? So this is what it looks like. Wakaru, the ru becomes ri, and you add mashita. Wakarimashita. And this is what it looks like if you were to write it with kanji. If you convert an iru-eru verb, then you drop the ru to form the stem, and then you add the verb ending. So if you had taberu, which is to eat, you drop the ru, and you just add mashita. Tabemashita, I ate. So this is what that looks like. Taberu, drop the ru, add mashita. Tabemashita. Yes, ru will always change to ri in, it will always change to ri for polite verb endings. Depending on the verb ending, it will change, and we'll talk about those when we talk about verb endings. In this case, we're just doing polite verbs, right? Because we're learning polite Japanese. The reason we're learning polite Japanese is because this is generally what they do in classes. When you're beginning with your Japanese, you want to talk to strangers. You don't want to offend them accidentally by sounding too familiar. So they teach you polite Japanese to start, and then later you can learn casual Japanese and so on. Now, when I teach you structure, I'm actually going to teach you structure from plain Japanese, and then on top of that, I will build up the complex different forms of politeness and so on. But for now, when you're just starting out, I think we'll stick to the pattern, which is to learn polite Japanese, just in case if at any point you lose interest and stop, and you're just going to retain this little bit of Japanese, you're not going to accidentally offend someone. Okay. So here is miru, which is a regular verb, and, miru is an irregular verb, not irregular, iru-eru verb. And so here are the different ways that miru would be conjugated. So miru itself is to see. You drop the ru and you add your ending. So mimasu is I will see, right? Or I am seeing. This is the non-past positive. Mimasen is I am not seeing or won't see, which is the non-past negative. Mimashita, past positive, I saw. Mimasen deshita, past negative, I did not see. Okay, so this is for iru-eru verb, the second type. I think I don't have a similar slide for regular verbs, but I'll just talk about them quickly. If it was wakaru, wakaru becomes wakarimashita, wakarimasen, and wakarimasen deshita. Okay. So, now that we have verbs, let's talk about location and destination markers, ni and e. I know that this is he, but when it's used as a marker, it is e. Okay. This is another one of those pronunciation things. In the same way that wa becomes wa, even though it's ha, he becomes e when it's used like this. Okay. So you'd use ni for exact places and e for abstract places. And the way you'd use it then is place ni or place e and whatever it is you're going to say. So let's see that in example. Tokyo ni ikimasu. Right? So iku was to go. If you make it ikimasu, that's now your polite present or future positive. So I will or am going to Tokyo, and Tokyo ni then marks your destination. Tokyo ni ikimasu. If you want to tie this back to last lesson, ni is the target of an action. So if iku is your verb, which is go, Tokyo ni ikimasu, to Tokyo, I will go. If you used an abstract location rather than a definite location like Tokyo, if you just said the south, which is Minami, then you would say Minami e ikimasu. So A is less common. You can use ni as well here. You can say minami ni ikimasu. It's not incorrect to use ni. It's just that you will see a sometimes because it's the archaically correct one to use in this case. A is mostly used when someone writes a letter to someone else. Then it would be whoever's name it is, a, as to and the person that you're talking about, because you don't know their exact location, but you generically can describe where they are as wherever the person is, a. Let's extend then what we know with some verb endings, right? 学校に行きません. 学校 is school. So 学校に行きません is I'm not going to go to school. Right? So ません is will not go, polite. And what are you doing? You're to school. 学校に行きません. I'm not going. 銀行に行きませんでした. So 行きませんでした is did not go. Now it's past negative. And 銀行 is bank. 銀行に to the bank. I did not go. Ni is also a time marker. So this is a little complicated, right? But get used to this idea. The same character can have different functions in a sentence. So this ni is the time marker, and this is not the one we just saw, which is the destination marker ni. Okay? This ni is at. All right? So you have a time, ni, and the rest of your sentence. And I'd mentioned yesterday, but I think we'd skipped this idea, so it would have been a little complicated. If you have an exact time, then it would be time ni and whatever you're saying. But you have an inexact time, like a relative time expression, tomorrow, next week. Then you don't need the ni, and you can just have time and the rest of your sentence. So, 3月に行きませんでした. 3月 is March, right? Third month, so March. に行きませんでした. I did not go in March. So let's combine what we know now all together and form a bigger sentence. 去年の5月に中学に行きました. Okay. 去年 last year. 5月 May. 中国 China. Okay, so we have two ni's here. 5月に this is the time, and 中学に this is your destination. 去年の5月 in May of last year. 去年の5月に中学に行きました. I went to China in May of last year. 去年の5月に中国に行きました. Here's a bigger sentence. Again, we're going to use all the concepts we learned so far, so stick with me, but you have all of the stuff that you need to understand this sentence. 来年の夏に 夏 is summer. 東京に行きます. でも沖縄には行きません. 来年の夏 next year's summer に東京に to Tokyo 行きます. I will go. でも沖縄には as for to Okinawa, right? This is what the ni wa is doing, and we'll talk about combining particles again in more detail in the future. Okinawa ni wa as to Okinawa, ikimasen. I will not go. So the full sentence in English is I will be going to Tokyo in the summer of next year, but I won't go to Okinawa. Okay. So hopefully this sentence made sense to you. If it doesn't, that's fine. You're still learning these ideas, and I'm throwing them at you very quickly. But if you were able to keep up, well done. You're doing a really good job. Okay. If you wanted to talk about the time of day, right, here's how you would do it. So, what time, specifically hour of day, is nanji. So, ji, this kanji means time. And in this case, when you use it like this, nanji, it's what time, specifically time of the day. Arubaito, this is in katakana. Arubaito is a German word which means part time job. It's sometimes just shortened to baito as well. So you might hear either arubaito or baito, and that just means part time job. And then yasumi is a break or a vacation or a day off. So the hours of the day is just number plus ji. Ichiji, ni ji, this is a typo. This is ni ji. Sanji, yoji, goji, rokuji, shichiji, hachiji, kuji, juji, juichiji, and juniji. Okay. That said, even though it is shichiji, because shichiji sounds very similar in terms of the, when you listen to it, when you're broadcasting that in like an announcement or over the radio or something where there is a decent amount of interference, shichiji will change to nanaji just for clarity. Minutes are hun. Okay, this is hun. So the way you would count them: ippun, nifun, sampun, yonpun, gofun, roppun, nanafun, happun or hachifun, kyofun, and juppun or juppun. So it's either juppun or jippun. Either one is fine. Which one of these you use is based on your local dialect or preferences. Similar thing with like happun versus hachifun. It's a similar thing. Oh, stream has ended. What? Okay, yeah. When did the stream crash? Did you see this stuff? All of this? Gone black a while ago. Okay. Okay, you did see this. That's good. So the minutes, ippun, nihun, sampun, yonpun, and so on. Again, these are counter words, right? You have number plus something. In this case, the counter is minutes. It continues as you go higher, juppun, nijuppun, sanjuppun, and so on. So, nanji ni ikimasu ka? At what time? At what time will you be going? Hachiji ni ikimasu. I'll go at 8 o'clock. Okay? Nanji ni ikimasu ka? Hachiji ni ikimasu. Relative times within the day, you have ban, gozen, and gogo. So ban, this is like half, right? And this is half past. So if you wanted to say like 8:30, you could say it with ban. If you want to say AM, gozen, and if you wanted to say PM, gogo. So, arubaito wa itsu desu ka? When is your part-time job, right? Itsu was when. So, arubaito wa itsu desu ka? Ashita no gozen 9 ji han desu. Okay. Tomorrow's mornings, 9:30, right? 9 o'clock and a half. So it's tomorrow at 9:30 a.m. Okay. And this could be either han or it could be ban. It depends on how you're reading the kanji, but either one would be okay. So we have that. Here are a couple of more particles. The kara, which is from, and made, which is until. So if you had a time or a place, kara, and another time or place, made. This is from this to this. So, 仕事, which is work. 仕事はいつまでですか? How long does your work go? 午後8時までです. It's until 8 p.m. 来週の木曜日までです. This is a different way to answer this question. Instead of answering with the time, you answer with the date. So, next week until Thursday. So, when does your work end? Either 8 p.m. or next Thursday. These are different ways to answer the same question. When you say itsu, itsu is a when, open question when. If you wanted a specific time, you would say nanji made, right? And that would tell you the time. Or if you wanted a specific day, you would, ask that question, itsuka. Okay. So I think that, coupled with the stream issues and just the sheer content that I've given at you, we'll call that the end for today. If you have any questions, go ahead and ask them in chat. Thank you for coming as always and bearing with the technical difficulties. Hopefully the archive is not too badly affected. I think having learned some verbs now, yes, you didn't learn too many verbs. You learned iku and wakaru and miru. Kuru and suru were irregular verbs, so you don't really know how to use them yet. But the good news is that, o is used to mark the object of a sentence. So what the verb is acting on. So if I had a ball and I was throwing it, boru o nageru is I am throwing the ball, right? So again, I have a ball, and if I throw the ball, then the action throw is acting on the ball, right? So boru o and throw is how this works. So boru o nageru. So if you were eating something, then if the verb is eat, and the thing that you're eating is cake, keiki o taberu. So that's how o works. And again, you're writing wo, but you're saying o. I would say when the subject acts on an object, not the topic. The topic is not part of the logic of the sentence. So even if you remove the topic, it should make sense. The subject is the thing that does your verb. Iku does not use o because you go to a place, right? So you don't act on something to go somewhere, right? Going does not require you to act on something. It would be you go to. Yeah. So not all verbs will use o because they don't have an object on which they act. Rather, they have destinations, or they have some things are self-move, in which case you don't have to specify that you're moving yourself. It's understood, and so on. So for example, if you say I fall down, then falling implies in itself the movement. So it's where do you fall, but it's not so much who falls. Not target, I'm going to say object, and then I'm going to say target is ni. So ni is who the target of the action is, which is where you want the action to end up. So if I say boro anata ni nageru, that is I'm throwing the ball to you. So I want the throw action to end at you. But yeah, I think you have the right ideas. I'm just trying to use a very specific set of words so that in the future, when I teach you the structure from the ground up, I want it to be the same language consistently. But yeah, you have the idea. So keiki o taberu, and then Tokyo ni iku is I go to Tokyo, but it's not I go Tokyo. That doesn't work. And yeah, this wo versus o thing, this is similar to how e becomes a, or how wa, right? It's ha, but you say wa. And this is a change in when they standardized how they're writing things in hiragana. They wrote these characters down, but the way that they've always said things stayed the way they said things. So this wo never shows up in a word. It's only this particle. E, it might show up in a word as he, like hechakucha or something. Or, it can show up as be or as pe as well. Ha can show up in a word like ohayo or hayaku. It can show up, but o will not. Okay. There will be times when it is said as wo. Those tend to be in songs, because it fits the flow of the song easier if you say wo and rather than o, because o right after like a vowel creates like a stop sound, and that's a little complicated to sing. So you will probably hear wo in songs sometimes. You might hear it in speech as well occasionally, but it's o. So if you wanted to say boru o nageru is how you would say it, not boru wo nageru, even though you write it that way. All right, but a good question. Any other questions? Okay, not seeing any. So next time we'll learn katakana. All right. I know you might not be fully comfortable with hiragana yet, but I think katakana, it's useful to know at this stage, because then we can just start using sentences, right? You can have foreign words loaned in like boru. We can just put those in the sentence and not have to worry about, how do I write this? And we're going to start using the right writing system for words that belong to the right thing. Even in today's lesson, we had words like lobster, beer, arbaito, McDonald's, right? A lot of words come from foreign languages in Japanese. And so knowing katakana is very helpful, especially as Japanese is evolving and towards the future. It is becoming more and more anglicized, and a lot of the original Japanese words for things are being abandoned in favor of the English word for them, because on the internet, everyone calls things by their English words. Or when you have to invent a new word to describe a new concept, you just borrow the existing English word, even if you could invent a Japanese word to describe it. Things like internetto it's English, it's internet. Just use the word as is. So knowing katakana, I think that's going to be really helpful for us, because now we can start to build our vocabulary. And if you see a word in katakana, you can guess that, okay, this is a word that I probably already know, so I don't have to learn this in my vocabulary. It's just an English word, most likely. It could be a German word like arbaito, or it could come from somewhere else as well. But generally, it's going to be a word you know. All right. I went to Tokyo is ore wa Tokyo ni ikimashita. Yes, that is exactly right. Good job. You're learning. And so what I would do, right, you can look up verbs on the internet. Actually, let me tell you about this, okay, really quickly. So give me a second. I'm just going to create a clear screen. But basically, let me give you a very, very helpful resource that I like to use all the time. Okay, so the resource, I'll write it down for you. So it is jisho.org. So jisho is a Japanese word that means dictionary. Jisho.org, this is like an online English to Japanese dictionary that you can use. So if you don't know how to say a word in Japanese, you can type it in English and it'll give it to you in Japanese. Alternatively, if you don't know a word in Japanese, but you see it somewhere and you copy paste it, it'll tell you what it means in English. And it's able to look up words, whether you type them in English, you type them in Romaji, you type them in hiragana, katakana, or kanji as well. And then it'll have details about them. Sometimes it might even have example sentences and so on. So you can use this. I use this all the time, especially when I'm doing like song breakdowns or something, because I'm translating the song myself rather than relying on existing translations. I will put words that I've not seen before into Jisho to get an understanding for them, or sometimes even words that I do know, I'll put into Jisho to see if it has alternative meanings that I don't remember, to see if a song means something different than I expected. Okay, so this is a really useful resource that I would check out all the time. The other thing is, if you want to just practice your sentence formation, right? I would use DeepL as a translator service. I think it's .com. So go to DeepL and type in Japanese, right? You should be, I think you've figured out your Japanese keyboards because you're able to type in chat. I think DeepL is a little better with naturally written Japanese than Google Translate is. Google Translate almost necessitates you to write with kanji, and it requires you to explicitly state every sentence's, each part of the sentence that to form it grammatically. DeepL can infer a little bit. So I do like, if you wanted to just practice writing a sentence, or if you were going to type a sentence and you just want to double check, does this make sense? I would use DeepL for that, right? So you can always ask me if you want to, but if there's something quick that you want to check on your own, or you feel like, oh, I can just look this up, I don't need to ask it, these two websites should be really helpful for you. Okay, so with that, I've used up a lot of your time, but hopefully you found it entertaining. So thank you for coming, and we'll see you again tomorrow.